The wind whispered softly against the window, its familiar rustling a comforting background noise as I sat at the kitchen table. My old hands trembled slightly as I held my coffee cup, the warmth from the drink offering a small reprieve against the chill of early morning. My fingers, once strong and capable, now felt delicate, frail. I watched them as they gripped the cup, a reminder of how much had changed over the years. I could almost hear Henry's voice in the stillness of the room. His voice that had always been so steady, so strong. The silence was a constant reminder that he was no longer here, that the man who had once shared this space with me had been gone for far too long. There were mornings when I still expected him to walk through that door, his work boots thudding against the floor, ready to ask about the coffee. But those days were gone. Now it was just me, alone in a world that was moving on without me. The house, once filled with the bustle of our children, now echoed with the heavy weight of emptiness. Lori, my daughter, still came by from time to time, but it was always brief. Quick visits, a hurried cup of tea, and then she was off again. The life she had built with Tim seemed so far removed from the one I had known. And Josh, my son. His calls had become more and more infrequent. "Busy with work, Mom," he'd say. "Busy with work. Always busy." I tried not to let it get to me. After all, I had lived my life for them. Every decision I had made, every sacrifice, had been for their happiness, for their futures. But now, when I needed them the most, they were slipping away, as if I were an afterthought. The phone call from Lori had been the final blow. When she told me that she and Tim had decided it was time for me to move into a nursing home, it was as if the floor had fallen out from under me. "It's for the best, Mom," she had said, her voice soft but firm. "You can't keep living on your own. With your health. It's just safer this way." Safer. Safer for whom? I had given them everything, my time, my love, my energy. And now they wanted to make decisions for me as though I were no longer capable of making my own. The anger that had simmered inside me for days bubbled up in that moment, but I said nothing. I hung up the phone, feeling the cold weight of betrayal settle over me. Later that evening, as I sat alone in the kitchen, I saw the headlights of a car pull into the driveway. Lori's car. She was here to talk, no doubt to convince me that this was the best choice for me. But I wasn't the helpless old woman she thought I was. I was not about to let them make a decision about my life without a fight. I walked to the door, my heart pounding. I wasn't sure what I was going to say to her, but I knew it had to be something strong, something that would make her see me, really see me, for the first time in years. Lori stood on the porch when I opened the door, her face framed by the glow of the porch light. She had that look of concern, the one I had seen so many times before. But this time it didn't fool me. "Mama, we need to talk," she began, her voice filled with false sweetness. "You know, this is really for the best." "No," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You don't get to make that decision for me. I'm not a child, and I'm not some burden to be put away out of sight." Her eyes widened, and she took a step back, but I didn't let her speak. I was done listening to her apologies, done with the pity that dripped from her words like poison. "I'm still here, Lori. I'm still your mother. And I'll make my own choices from now on." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "I've spent my life raising you, loving you, supporting you. And now you want to take that away from me." My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. "No. I won't go quietly into that place. I won't let you decide what's best for me." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Lori stood there, her mouth open as if she had expected something else, some sort of resignation from me. But I wasn't going to give her that. Not this time. "I'll take care of myself," I said, my voice hard. "I'm not ready to give up yet." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she just stared at me, her face a mixture of concern and frustration. But I could see the shift in her eyes, the realization that I wasn't going to bend to her will, that I wasn't going to be the woman she thought I was. I took a deep breath, stepping back inside the house. The air was still, heavy with the weight of our conversation. "I need some time," I said, my voice softer now, but no less firm. I need to think about things. But I'll decide. Not you. Not Tim. Lori hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Okay, Mom. But I think you'll see we're only trying to help. I'll help myself, I said, closing the door between us. Good night, Lori. I didn't hear from her again that evening, and I didn't expect to. But the decision had been made. I would not let them decide for me. Not again. Not when there was still life left in me, when I still had the strength to fight. As I sat down in the quiet of my kitchen, I felt something stir within me. A resolve I hadn't known was still there. I wasn't done yet, and no one was going to make me feel like I was. The next few days were filled with a silence that echoed in my head, still reverberating after I had closed the door on Lori. I wasn't prepared for the aftermath, where she and Tim would come to me and begin making decisions about my future. Not anymore. They thought I would give in, but I knew that the game wasn't over yet. And then on the second day, when Lori called again about ensuring my future, I realized I had to act faster than I thought. I put the phone down, took a deep breath, and thought about what remained. I didn't need their help, nor their offers of care. I would decide what to do next. Henry had always said that I had the courage and wisdom to get out of any situation. And he was right. I was not ready to just accept the decision they made for me. The old house, where Henry and I had spent most of our lives, still held the memories. Memories of the love we nurtured, of the little joys that made each day special. I always thought this house would be my place for the rest of my days. But now, with everything changing, I began to realize that this chapter was coming to an end. But I wasn't ready to go to a nursing home, as they had tried to impose on me. My hands were still strong, even if they were old. My mind was clear, and I could take care of myself. Since I had made the decision to change things, I began to act. The first thing I did was call an attorney I had known for years, someone we had worked with when Henry and I were sorting out our real estate matters. I knew exactly what they wanted to do to me, but they didn't know that I was ready for a fight. Mr. Stewart, the lawyer, understood immediately that I wasn't just trying to maintain my independence but to turn the situation around in my favor. His smile was restrained, but I could tell that he felt the seriousness of my intentions. He advised starting simple. Rework all the paperwork, check the status of my house ownership, and change the will to ensure everything was protected. I agreed without hesitation. They thought elderly people couldn't fight for their rights, Doris, he said. But you're showing that strength is in the mind, not in age. I smiled because I knew. The battle was just beginning. Little did I know how far these changes would take me. The next morning, after gathering all the necessary documents, I headed to the bank. I was calm, although my heart was racing just a bit faster. I walked through the familiar corridors, the same place I had spent many years organizing all my financial matters. Now I was ready to tackle another job, one that would change everything. The bank service was prepared when I arrived. I knew my children hadn't been there yet, but they would understand once it was all over. This step was crucial, and I understood that their plans would vanish once I finished these changes. We've reworked all the documents, Mrs. Campbell, the kind bank girl said after I signed the papers. Your property is now solely in your hands, as it should be. I felt a small victory, but I couldn't afford to stop. Lori and Joshua still had no idea how their treatment of me would soon change. They thought I would be helpless, that I would give up. But I was ready to prove that nothing had been lost. That evening, I sat in my favorite chair by the window, watching the moonlight softly illuminate my old curtains. I could feel my heart begin to beat in rhythm with the new sense of freedom. No matter how many years I had, I was ready for change. And no one, not even my own children, could take that from me. You know what they say, if you want to change something, start with yourself. And I was ready to begin. The morning I opened the window and inhaled the fresh air filling my little kitchen, I knew that the changes I had made were just the beginning. They didn't see it, but I was prepared for anything. Henry always told me that the most important thing was not to give up, even when the situation seemed hopeless. And I wasn't giving up now. After changing all the documents and blocking any attempts by my children to take control, the next step was simple, yet significant. I decided to visit the very retirement home where Lori and Tim had been so insistent on sending me. I didn't just want to see what it looked like. I needed to understand why they were so determined to put me there. This was to be my final check, my last step in uncovering what they had been planning behind my back. As I drove to the location, I noticed that everything around the building appeared as though it was a typical, peaceful retirement home. The beautiful flowers in the yard, the cozy rooms, the clean corridors, everything designed to comfort an elderly person looking for peace. But something wasn't right. I couldn't place it, but I felt an undercurrent of unease, something hidden beneath the surface. When I entered the building, one of the nurses, a woman in her 40s, with a sharp, assessing look in her eyes, approached me. "Are you here to visit someone?" she asked, eyeing me closely. I explained that I just wanted to have a look around, perhaps consider it as a potential place to live. Her gaze didn't soften, but she motioned for me to follow, though I noticed her body language had grown more guarded. The tour was brief, but every step of my questioning revealed more than I could have imagined. She showed me the rooms with metal beds lined up against the walls, a quiet hall where elderly residents sat, their heads lowered. If I had been a different person, I might have thought it the ideal place to spend the quiet years of one's life. But I knew better. Here I wouldn't do anything but wait. But it wasn't until later that I uncovered the shocking truth. Once the tour ended, I felt uneasy, but I still didn't have all the information I needed. I asked to meet with the administrator, not revealing exactly what I was looking for. I had to see everything. In the administrator's office, there were a few documents scattered across the desk, but what caught my eye was one, a report on the people waiting for placement. And there, clearly written, was my name, marked with certain annotations that indicated my future there. What was even more troubling was the label next to it, Money Management Program. This enraged me to the core. I asked the administrator to explain what this meant, and it was then that I realized everything had been arranged even before I knew about Lori and Tim's plan. They had already assumed that my condition would allow them to take control of everything, and I would be cared for in such a place. When I pressed further, the administrator began to look at me with new eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "I was warned about you, but I'm not sure if I should continue." That was exactly what I was looking for. It turned out that Lori had already sent all the necessary documents to ensure I'd be placed in the facility, preparing for what they thought would be my easy transition. I left the administrator's office with a clear plan. This couldn't be left without consequences. I wasn't going to be trapped like this. My children had no idea that I had begun to act on my own, and that was the one thing I couldn't allow them to know. That evening I returned home, filled with determination. I wasn't just sitting back and waiting anymore. I had taken action. If Lori and Tim thought I wouldn't fight, they were about to see that I could do much more than they had ever imagined. The day was coming to a close, but I felt as though I was already on the path to something significant, something that would change everything. I picked up the phone again and dialed the number for my lawyer. This call wasn't about petty things. I was ready to act, and this time it was going to be different. The thought of what I had discovered in the retirement home office didn't leave my mind. Lori and Tim had set everything up as though it were for my benefit, but in reality, it was nothing but a trap. I was calm, yet deeply unsettled. They thought I would just give in, that I, an older woman, wouldn't be able to see what was really happening. But I was ready to show them just how wrong they were. The next morning, after I drank my usual cup of tea, I set off to meet my lawyer, Mr. Stewart. I knew he was the only person who truly understood the importance of this situation and how to bring it to a successful conclusion. We'd worked together for years, and I trusted him completely. He'd helped Henry and me with all our property matters, and even after Henry passed, he was there, guiding me through the paperwork. But now things were different. This wasn't about just documents or properties. It was about my very freedom. When I entered his office, Mr. Stewart was sitting at his desk, flipping through papers. He looked up as I came in. "Doris," he said, his tone calm yet assessing. "I can see you're ready for decisive action." "I'm ready to do whatever it takes to protect myself," I answered, sitting down in the chair opposite him. I want to change my situation, and right now they think everything is under control. But it's not. I told him everything, about what I'd discovered at the retirement home, the documents I had found, and how Laurie had already arranged everything behind my back. Mr. Stewart listened intently, his gaze growing more serious as I spoke, never breaking eye contact with me. His mind was clearly processing all the details. "This is serious," he said. "They clearly tried to take advantage of your trust, not knowing that you might be sharper than they thought. But we can still turn this around. What exactly can we do?" Yes. Mr. Stewart began to explain how we could block all their attempts to influence my life legally. We had the option to file a lawsuit, not only to block their plans with a retirement home but also to protect my assets from any attempt they might make to take control of them. We could investigate every move Laurie and Tim had made, file for breach of trust, and restore justice. He also advised me to go a step further. Check all the financial transactions that had been made between my children and their banks or other financial institutions. The idea that they might be trying to manipulate my finances behind the scenes struck me hard, but I knew he was right. They'd already tried to operate in the shadows, and I couldn't allow them to succeed. "This will take time, but you can prove your case," he said, looking at me with respect. "You have the strength to reclaim your independence." That was the moment when I realized that not only could I do this, I had to. For all the years I had spent supporting my children, giving them my heart and my time, it was now my turn. I wouldn't allow them to simply take everything I had worked so hard to build. We decided to start with the legal steps, refusing to accept any new agreements made on my behalf and preparing to file a lawsuit. That same day, I began gathering the necessary documents that would prove my children's attempts to manipulate me. I couldn't let them think for even a second that their plan would go unpunished. As I worked through the papers, a new feeling began to rise inside me. It wasn't just a fight for my assets, it was a fight for my right to remain independent, for my right to stay who I was. I was going to fight until the end, even if it meant going up against my own children. Meanwhile, Laurie had no idea that I had already taken things to a whole new level. I decided to act cautiously, not rushing, but gradually blocking her every move, giving her no chance to take what was mine. I wouldn't let her win this easily. And today, I had taken yet another step toward victory. A few days after taking my initial steps in the fight, I began to realize just how far Laurie and Tim were willing to go to take control of my life and my assets. They had no idea that I had already made my decision and was acting on it. But their manipulations continued to escalate, and they soon understood that I wasn't merely rejecting their help. I was going on the offensive. The next morning, I set off to meet with Mr. Stewart, my lawyer, to continue the process. We had already filed a lawsuit to stop Laurie and Tim from gaining control, but the next step was the most important. I needed to make sure my children could not use my assets for their own gain. As soon as I entered his office, Mr. Stewart greeted me with a somber expression on his face. "Doris," he said, looking up from his paperwork, "we've got problems. Tim and Laurie have filed documents under your name, claiming that you're no longer capable of managing your assets. This is going to be a complicated process, but I'm confident we can resolve it." "How could they do this?" I asked, feeling a wave of anger rise inside me. "They've submitted fake medical reports, stating that you are incapable of making decisions due to physical or mental conditions. You need to be prepared, they're going to take the next step. They'll try to find a doctor who will corroborate their claim, and this is going to be serious." I was furious. How could they disrespect me so much, trying to make others say I was incapable of making decisions for myself? I wasn't about to stand by and let them implement their plan. They had forgotten one crucial thing. I wasn't the kind of woman who would just walk into a trap. "I won't let this happen," I said, gritting my teeth. "As soon as they try, I'll be ready. I'll fight for my rights until the end." After hours of working on our strategy, we decided that the next step would be to find a doctor who would confirm that I was in a healthy mental and physical state. It was essential to prove that their documents were forgeries. And I wasn't about to leave this unchallenged. We also began looking for additional evidence to support my position, showing that I wasn't just aging but that I had the full right to make decisions about my life and my assets. When I returned home, Lori called me again. She tried once more to convince me that everything she was doing was for my own good. Her voice sounded sweet, but I could hear the undertones of control she was attempting to impose. "Mama, we just want you to be safe, to be able to relax without worrying about money," she said. "You know you're not getting any younger, and we want to do everything for your comfort." I kept myself composed, even though my heart was racing, feeling how she was trying to manipulate me again. "I've already made my decision, Lori," I said calmly. "I don't need your help in this way. I want to live independently." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then she quietly said, "This is very bad, Mama. You don't understand what you're doing. We're all worried that you'll fall into danger." Hung up the phone. She was still trying to turn the situation in her favor, but I knew this wasn't over. I could feel it in my bones that her next move was coming. The next day, I made an important call to the doctor recommended by Mr. Stewart. I asked him to perform an examination to confirm my healthy state. This was necessary to neutralize their attempts to outmaneuver me through fraudulent documents. Word began to reach me that Lori was already trying to gather signatures on a document that would allow her to take control of my bank accounts and other assets. This was the final step. But I was ready. I realized that this battle was nearing its end, and everything would depend on how far I was willing to go to defend my rights. "This time I will win," I whispered softly as I closed the door behind me. My children probably thought they could take everything from me, but I was ready to show them that it wasn't so easy to take what I had built over a lifetime. They didn't know that I was prepared to take any measures necessary to ensure my life would remain truly free. That week, everything seemed to accelerate. Lori kept calling, but her words no longer affected me. Her concern was nothing but a mask for manipulation, and her twisted attempts to take control of my life left me with no choice. I couldn't sit back and wait for her to finish playing the game I never agreed to. If they thought I would just give up, it was their biggest mistake. I was ready to expose their game. Every move they made, every step they took was calculated, but they had no idea that I had already anticipated it all. However, I needed to take the final step, and it had to happen quickly. The city began to quiet as I dialed Mr. Stewart's number to tell him about the latest developments. "I know what they're doing," my voice was firm. "Lori won't stop until she gets everything. She doesn't care about me or what I want. She wants control over everything. The money, my house, my decisions." Mr. Stewart was already aware of the situation, but even he looked slightly concerned. "She's going all the way, Doris," he said. "If we don't take decisive action now, she might succeed. We could file a lawsuit for unlawful property seizure, but it will take time, and you're already in danger." I felt my heart tighten. I couldn't wait for months for this to be resolved. I needed to act fast. That same day, I met with Mr. Stewart and told him my plan. We decided that I would take radical action to make Lori and Tim stop. We filed a request for an urgent review of all signed documents and demanded an investigation into the bank accounts and financial transactions Lori and Tim had conducted without my consent. This would be our trump card. They couldn't guess how far I was willing to go in my fight. But when I returned home, I had to face the reality. As soon as I opened the door, my phone rang, and the screen lit up with Lori's name. This time I decided to answer. She sounded as confident as ever. "Mama, I just don't understand you anymore," I heard her voice. "We're doing this for you. What else do you need? We want you to be safe, to not have to worry anymore. You're not able to handle it on your own. You don't understand how important this is." I couldn't listen to those words anymore. The lies veiled as empty promises. "I understand everything, Lori," I said, trying to keep my calm. "I understand your and Tim's intentions. I know what you want. But I also have the right to my own life, and I won't let you decide what's best for me." She didn't expect such a response. There was a long pause. Then I could feel her struggling to gather her words. "You don't understand," she finally sighed. "You won't be able to choose for yourself, and you won't be able to keep everything under control." I didn't respond. I simply hung up the phone. She kept trying to convince me, but now I knew the game was over. A few days later, I received the official statement from Mr. Stewart confirming that all the forged documents regarding my ability to make decisions had been declared invalid. Laurie and Tim's plans had failed, and they couldn't even understand how I had discovered their manipulations so quickly. Now, holding all the documents in my hands, I felt an incredible sense of relief. My freedom was preserved, but this wasn't just a victory in court. This was a victory in the fight to be myself, to have the right to decide how and where I would live, what my relationships with my children would look like, and what would happen with my property. I walked over to the window, looking at the sun setting behind the horizon, and I felt the freedom to breathe once again. My children could no longer take away what I had built. This was my land, my story. And once again, I was at the pages of it. The days that passed since I had uncovered Laurie and Tim's plan felt too short. But I knew the real verdict was still to come. They still hadn't realized that I wasn't going to give up, even when it seemed like all the cards had been laid out. I was ready for the next move, and this time it was going to be the decisive one. The legal checks were almost finished. The forged medical documents had been declared fraudulent, and all the financial agreements Laurie and Tim had signed without my consent were starting to come back to me like a boomerang. They had no idea how much I had actually learned. But the real fight didn't begin when I filed the lawsuit and fought for justice in court. It began when I decided to take back control of what was left, and this wasn't just about taking back my money or property. That morning I woke up early. I opened the window, and the sun played on the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant yellows and golds. I took a deep breath and felt my heart beat slowly and steadily. This wasn't just a victory, it was my new beginning. Laurie called me in the morning. I didn't pick up the phone. Her calls no longer caused me any anxiety. She didn't even realize that she had already lost. But that was just the beginning of her disappointment. A few hours later, I received a letter from the lawyer's office. A letter that changed everything. It stated that Tim and Laurie had not only lost access to my accounts and property, but they were also required to return part of the money they had unlawfully used for personal purposes. This meant that they were not only forced to abandon their plans but also had to compensate for their actions. I had managed to reclaim everything that belonged to me, but this time I was ready to donate part of my assets to charity, to support organizations that help women in similar situations. I knew this step would truly bring me peace. After the court's ruling, I decided not to hide the truth from Laurie any longer. She had started this game, but I had decided to finish it my way. A few days later I met Laurie at a cafe. She was quiet, her gaze didn't welcome my presence, but I didn't look away. "I did everything for you," she started, her voice distant yet oddly broken. "You don't understand. We thought this would be better." "Did you think I wouldn't see your plans, Laurie?" I responded, not raising my voice. "Did you think I'd just agree? You should have known I'd never give up my right to freedom. This isn't just about money, it's about dignity. And you need to understand that." Meanwhile, behind her, I saw Joshua approaching us with that same look on his face, the one I hadn't seen for a long time. It was the face of someone who understood that everything had changed, and there was no turning back. "Mama, we didn't mean to hurt you," he said, blushing a little, as if struggling to find the right words but failing. "We just thought this would be easier for everyone." "Easier for who?" I answered, not giving him the chance to respond. "For you. For me. All these years I helped you, supported you. But now you want to take away my right to be myself. You can't make decisions for me anymore. I've already made my own." I stood up from the table, looked at both of them and said, "You thought I wouldn't fight, but you have no idea how strong I am. And now I control my life again. This is the last time you drag me into your games." I left the cafe, leaving them at the table, with thoughts I was sure would begin to haunt them now. My fight was over. But it wasn't just a legal victory. It was my victory over myself, a victory over those who tried to erase my right to live the way I wanted. I was free. And this time, I knew for sure that it wasn't just a victory in the battle for property. This was my victory in the fight for my dignity and my right to choose.